This is a recording of a session originally given on the 12th of October 2020 to a group of Methodists who form the COP26 Climate Action Group. These are people drawn from Methodism across the world, and it's organised by the UK Methodist Church to promote campaigning work in advance of the UN COP26 meeting next November, in the hope that significant steps will be taken to address the climate crisis we're now facing. Tonight. So I'll begin because I think we need to address this with, well, as it says there, problematic Christian theology. I think we're having to do quite a bit of catch up within the Christian church, because some of our theology has not been helpful in terms of us engaging with the environmental crisis that we currently face. And let me suggest two key problematic themes of Christian theology. Firstly, this theme of human lordship over the earth. And of course, we get that emphasis from chapter 1 of Genesis and the first creation story we have there, in which it says, let them have dominion over all living things, and be fruitful, multiply, and fill the earth and subdue it. So dominate and subdue, this has been fairly central to our understanding of how we might relate to the natural world around us as Christians for many centuries. We've seen it as a gift from God for us to use and even abuse as we wish, to draw from for our benefit, to extract from, to even exhaust, because it's been given to us to use as we wish. And this is problematic. As I suggest there, it's shaped our relationship with the natural world. So we see ourselves as being, in some sense, over it and having power over it to use the natural world as we wish. It also, this power over, this domination, dominion relationship with the earth, has perhaps been easy for us to adopt because it resonates with other models of power relationships that we see in Scripture. I mean, we talk about the patriarchs in the Old Testament, and we have those models of power where the patriarch is head of the family, where the master is lord of the servants, where the husband is lord over the wife and children. There are other examples of this power over relationship within Scripture. And so this resonates, the creation narrative resonates with those other patterns of power relationship. And so it's been easy for us to adopt that. And then this kind of relationship with nature, the dominion over relationship, has helped us to see ourselves as separate from the rest of creation, to see ourselves as distinct from, over and above, having a different destiny to the rest of creation. And I'm suggesting that this has not been helpful in terms of treating the earth with respect, cherishing the earth, protecting the earth, even seeing ourselves as stewards of the earth, which is a familiar term we use to describe our relationship to the earth these days. Even that has something of this power over relationship. It sets us apart from the rest of creation. So that's one problematic Christian theme. The second one I want to share with you tonight is this end of the world theology. This notion, and we've got examples in Scripture which help to support this theology, this idea that the world we live in, the physical, material world,
the earth is passing. It's in some way fallen and part of the sinful past that will be left behind when the saved will go, in a sense, on to a better place, enter into the kingdom of heaven, the world, the new world of heaven, leaving behind to destruction the material world that we currently inhabit. So again, this is held by many people to be how they understand the salvation plan of God, that the earth is passing, the earth is fallen, the earth will cease to be as the faithful go to a better place. And so that kind of theology leads to an attitude which says that the earth has of no ultimate value, is of secondary value in terms of God's salvation plan. So those two Christian themes, lordship over the world and the end of the world theology, have not been helpful, it seems to me, in shaping a positive Christian eco-theology. So what I'm going to do now is share 5 ways in which we can start to build something more positive. And the first 2 address these problematic things firstly. So how do we deal with this human lordship theology? Well, you can look for a start to the lordship of Christ and see that lordship is reinterpreted by Christ in terms of servanthood. It's stood on its head, and the true lordship is actually seen in service and care for others. So if we are to have dominion over the earth in terms of the lordship of Christ, or from the perspective of the lordship of Christ, that may affect our relationship with the earth, change our relationship with the earth. So that's one way in which some theologians have sought to address this human lordship theology. Others have looked to another part of the creation story, to the second creation narrative in chapter 2 of Genesis, the story of Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden. And there we don't hear about humanity being given permission to have dominion and subdue the earth. In fact, we hear there of humanity being placed in the Garden of Eden by God to till it and to keep it. That's the primary role and purpose in Genesis 2:15 of humanity. And that's a very different role to the dominion role that we see in chapter 1. And keeping the earth, what does that mean? Well, we have the same word in chapter 4 of Genesis in the story of Cain and Abel, when Cain says to God, "Am I my brother's keeper?" Or in other words, do I have to be responsible for my brother's welfare? Do I have to look after and protect my brother? And God's answer is very clearly, yes, you do. Well, in the same way, God calls upon humanity to be keepers of the earth. So we could see our role primarily as earth keepers rather than earth dominators. So it's a change of emphasis by looking at a different part of the creation story. And then finally, in terms of responding to human lordship theology, some theologians will point to us in Scripture, evidence of humanity being seen more as part of the community of creation rather than being seen as over and above creation. And the book of Job underlines that humanity's place in God's creation is not over and above and distinct and exceptional, but simply one part of the great creative work of God. So when Job complains, "Why me?" part of the answer that God gives is, well, there's nothing particularly special about you. All of creation is special, but you should have no particular expectation of having preferential treatment over and above the rest of creation. And that's part of God's response to Job. And then in Psalm 104, if you read through Psalm 104, it's a description of God's creative order, the elements of God's creation. And it's a kind of list which includes parts of the natural world, parts of the living world. And within that list, not separate and apart, but within that list, humanity finds its place. So in Psalm 104, humanity is simply one part of the whole community of creation, not over and above. And then in Matthew 6, we see Jesus encouraging the disciples to learn from the natural world around them. So not to see themselves as somehow superior to, wiser than, greater than the natural world, but part of it and able to learn from the birds of the air and the flowers in the fields and how they live day to day, trusting in God's providence. So it's changing our position, our understanding of where we sit in God's creative plan. So that's responses to human lordship theology. The end of the world theology, well, we can turn to other passages in the Bible where, rather than seeing the world as something that's going to get burnt up and discarded when God's final salvation comes into being, we see the world as being included, gathered up, all things in earth, in heaven, and things on earth, gathered up in God's salvation plan. So not to be discarded, but to be included in the final salvation plan of God. We also have this theme within Scripture of heaven breaking into the present reality. So heaven not being something that lies ahead after this world has, in a sense, been destroyed and discarded, but rather heaven breaking into the present earthly reality. And we see this in the Lord's Prayer. We see it in the teaching of Jesus. Anticipating, making known and real heaven on earth. And Charles Wesley picks up on that theme in his hymn, "Oh, for 1,000 tongues to sing." So here we see an integration of earth and heaven as one holistic whole, rather than earth being discarded and abandoned. So those are responses to those two problematic themes that I introduced. Three other key themes for me of eco-theology today. Here they are. The Trinity as a model for sustainable relationships. And this is something that's been promoted by Pope Francis in his encyclical Laudato Si. He puts great emphasis on the Trinity as being a helpful metaphor, model for good environmental practice. And he in turn has built on the work of Leonardo Boff, the Brazilian theologian, who wrote a book called Cry of the Earth, Cry of the Poor, in which he explores how the Trinity is a helpful Christian concept as we seek to create a more positive relationship with the world around us as Christians. So the old model I've talked about, power over, dominion, exploitation of the earth, us being over and above the earth. It's also linked, it seems, with this pursuit of unending growth as we seek to extract the riches and resources of the earth and turn them into economic growth within our economy. That's part of this old model of power over. Perhaps we need to be looking at a new model which can use the Trinity as a source of inspiration. When you think about the qualities of the Trinity, you can see how they might be applied to the wider context of our relationships with other people and with the world around us. So just as the Trinity is a community of interconnectedness, the three parts of the Trinity in a sort of continuous dance of interconnectedness, so perhaps that's the kind of model for relationships that we should be seeking in terms of our relationship with other people and with the earth, rather than this power over domination relationship. Just as the Trinity is a model for equality between the three parts of the Trinity, so perhaps we need to be looking for a new model of relationship with the earth and with people that promotes equality above hierarchy. And just as in the Trinity, power is spread out evenly, distributed out to the three persons of the Trinity, so perhaps rather than concentrations of power in a top-down kind of way, we need to be building relationships which encourage this distribution of power across human society and across the natural world. Sacredness of all, we see the three parts of the Trinity penetrating all of life, all of creation, and making all of life and creation sacred. And the Trinity is working for the common good, not only of the Trinity, but the common good of all. This too might be a helpful model for the new order, the new paradigm, the new way of existing in the world that we're seeking at the moment. As I say, Boff and Pope Francis have been very keen on the Trinity as a key theological theme. And then moving on, sufficiency and enoughness. This is another Christian theme that seems to be deeply relevant to the crisis we face, this crisis of overconsumption, accumulations of massive amounts of wealth in one part of the world and poverty, extreme poverty in other parts, depletion of natural resources, degradation of the world around us through greed, through overconsumption. So sufficiency, enoughness is an important theme, and it is a biblical theme. We have Paul talking in 2 Corinthians about sufficiency. And God is able to provide you with every blessing in abundance, so that by always having enough, and that's the Greek word there, autarkia, for sufficiency, having enough of everything, you may share abundantly in every good work. So it's a sense that recognizing the blessings, the wonderful blessings that we receive from God, we will develop a sense of contentment, a sense of satisfaction, enoughness with what we have and what we have received from God. And that will then liberate us to be generous with what we have, rather than to want to accumulate and hold on to more than we need. So sufficiency, it's there in Paul's writing. It's there in the Lord's Prayer again. Give us today our daily bread, or in other words, bread sufficient for this day, not bread for the next few weeks and months stored up, but just simply sufficient for this day. And we see links there in the Lord's Prayer with a story of manna from heaven, which couldn't be stored, needed to be used just for that day. And then as we look into the early church and the writings of the early church mothers and fathers, we see this theme of sufficiency continuing to be important to the early church. I've just given some examples there. Basil the Great, Ambrose and Augustine, all underlining the importance of sufficiency, enoughness for Christians. So I think that's a theme that we can explore as Christians today by looking to the Bible, by looking to the early church for support. And then finally, balance seems to me to be a biblical theme. that we can exploit and use and develop in our eco-theology as Christians. Let me explain what I mean by that. That the Sabbath laws are laws that promote balance, so that we have in those laws the fallow year. The land is given for us to use for 7 or 6 years, and during those years in which the land is put to use, the riches, the nutrients, the goodness of the soil is slowly depleted and exhausted, used up. But then those 6 years are followed by a year of rest, in which the exhausted soil can recover its goodness, can be restored and renewed. So a balance is established between extraction and repletion, and returning the soil to a good state. And it's the same idea of balance there with the Sabbath day of rest for humanity. 6 days of labor where we use up our resources, but then the day of rest when we can restore our resources and ready to begin again. We see it in the Sabbath laws. We see it also, this model of balance being played out in the Jubilee laws, so that after 50 years, 7 times 7 years, those who have found themselves in debt have those debts cancelled. Balance is restored for them. Those who have, because of debt, because of hardship, poverty, have lost their land and property, the balance is restored. They have their land returned to them, their property returned. And slaves, those who have become enslaved during that period, their slavery is ended. They are given their freedom. So there is this pattern of use of the natural world, extraction from the natural world, but only up to a point. And then balance is achieved through rest and recovery. Very different to the economic model that we still have dominantly in place in our world, which just continues on that ongoing extraction and using up of the natural world and the natural resources around us. As Christians, we can look to this teaching about balance in the Bible and encourage a more sustainable approach by looking at these themes. So I'm just going to recap those 5 themes which for me are important, and then I think perhaps we can just spend some time having a bit of discussion about those themes and other themes that might occur to you. So here's a little summary for you. Not lords of the earth. We need to move away from that model, but earth keepers and members of the community of creation, not exceptional and set apart, but just members of the community of creation. Yes, the earth is included in God's salvation plan, and heaven breaks into that earthly reality. It's not that this earth is doomed to destruction, so we don't have to really worry about what we do with it. It's part of God's salvation plan. The Trinity is a useful model, a helpful model for us as Christians, as we seek to promote and encourage life-giving, sustainable relationships with other people and with the planet. Useful resource. And then this theme of sufficiency, I think, is an important one for us too. We see Jesus alluding to the need for not storing up possessions, but living day by day, trusting in God's goodness. Paul uses the notion of enoughness, sufficiency, and the early church too. And then finally, this idea of balance within the economy and in terms of our relationship with the natural world around us. And just the last slide there is just a series of books which I found helpful. Again, there are other writers available. Leonardo Boff, Pope Francis, I think, is very strong on the environment. Richard Balcombe, he's written a lot about this community of creation. And then we see other writers there who've covered other aspects of eco-theology. It may be possible perhaps to leave that list with Andy if people want to go back to it. So I'll